Greetings, brothers and sisters. This is a video from PBS NewsHour. I believe in conspiracy theories until the one that pushed me over the edge. And then it says here, this is their qualifier. PBS is an American public broadcasting service, Wikipedia. Not about the conspiracy theories. I got a lot to do with what the Democratic Party has now done to sort of rig the election for Jojo Magoo against Kennedy. It's kind of hilarious. So I want to get into that because that's been exposed. But this, I'm not sure who sent me this, one of my viewers.
There was something out there to get you, and that's why my life was as bad as it was. I am Karen Robertson.
Okay, so look at who they chose.
I'm 30 and I'm a single mom. We're here to talk about the fact that I actually believed in conspiracy theories.
Okay, look at who they chose for this, this hit piece, right? They didn't choose someone who was college educated. It's a single mom who probably should think there's some conspiracies in the Twinkies she's been eating. So some single mom who's obese and, some, what people would consider white trash type of person. Not somebody who's educated, not someone who's articulate. Not someone who's articulate, somebody who is, this is what they always do.
Once upon a time ago.
Student reporting labs.
I'm McKenna Mead, a student reporter based here in Mississippi. I wanted to understand more about Karen's story.
Can you tell me a couple of the conspiracy theories that you believed in?
Okay, so this is in Mississippi somewhere, obviously some rural county or something it looks like. And, this is not, it's the kind of people that people who watch PBS look down on, right? They think they're better than someone who lives here. They think they're more educated. They think they're smarter, right? They think that this is a representation of Trumpers and things like that, right?
Was definitely an anti-vaxxer at one point or another. There was...
Again, what about anti-Twinkie?
Is one that I don't even know how to describe. Apparently our birth certificates look like some type of shipping things where we're selling stuff to China. Basically, China owns us or something crazy. And there's a movie called Zeitgeist, or a documentary. They talk about how Jesus' birth wasn't the first virgin birth.
This is Zeitgeist is one of those shill movies by those shill, whatever those guys were named.
They're trying to show you that a lot of what you've been taught isn't factual. And then at some point they go into 9/11 being an inside job. I didn't want to believe that our government would do that, but I kind of just straddled the fence on that one.
What resonated with you about the conspiracy theories?
I was in an abusive relationship.
Exactly. Like if she was in a healthy relationship, she wouldn't believe such things.
I didn't realize at the time was abusive. I got out and I got in one that was worse. I was trying to make the world make sense, and it was easier to believe that it was a bad place and something was out to get you. And that's why my life was where it was at and as bad as it was than it was to realize I had made bad choices.
Exactly. It was somebody else's fault, and it was the government's fault for government being sucked. The government's actually great. You just choose bad men and you have a bad food system, whatever reason that you're morbidly obese is because of your food choices, not the food that is presented to you by a system that gives you poisonous carcinogens and things like that.
Can you tell me why you kind of went off and researched all of the things that you believed in?
There was a very specific night, actually, that caused this. This guy and I were talking, and he knew about all these different conspiracy theories that I did. Then towards the end of the conversation, he was like, get this, flat Earth. And I was like, I thought he was joking. And he's like, dude, there's evidence that the Earth is flat. And he tells me to look in the sky A little while later, I saw him use a very, very hard drug. It made me realize if I'm thinking like someone like that, that
So, this is where she's come to terms with. She has an answer when the girl asks her, what did this do for you, conspiracy theories? Well, I was in abusive relationships and making bad choices. And, I met flat earthers that were on drugs. And, this is, again, like she already has solved the reason she fell for such crazy conspiracy theories. Conspiracies are at the heart of everything that is done in our country and our world. People conspire to make more money, to grab power. People do things in secret to exploit other people and the rest of it, right? I mean, that's a fact. Like you can find a conspiracy. It only takes 2 or more people to create a conspiracy to create wealth and power.
I should reconsider my belief system. So the very next day when I got on YouTube, I actually searched how to disprove a conspiracy theory. A month, maybe even less, went by before my brain just kind of clicked, and I was just like, all this is a bunch of hogwash.
Yeah, it's a hogwash.
And
It's all hogwash because first I was a conspiracy theorist and now I'm a debunker.
I kind of started going in the other direction.
During the course of you working through misinformation and figuring out, what was the truth, what was, kind of mixed up.
Working your way through misinformation. This is a term that college girls use in Mississippi.
How did Aslan fall into this?
I'm going to say roughly a year before she came along was when I became the version of myself I am now.
Yeah.
And that's going to be where you put your carrots, okay?
Yeah.
When I was
To where I'm planting carrots in a pool as a single mom.
pregnant, my best friend made me onesies for Aslan that said like science is not an alternative fact, and there's a bunch of different books for kids, and there's like a women in science book. She and I were actually working really hard to make sure like the baby had plenty of stuff, and I even had a parent reach out to me who was like, I think it's so cool that you're like over here planning on making sure your child's educated.
I know that you're
It doesn't fall for any conspiracy theories. I'm starting her young with books and gonna get her on. I bought her a subscription to Snopes. She's gonna grow up being a Snopeser.
writing a book that's going to help kids with critical thinking skills. Tell me about it.
It's just
Critical thinking skills by believing everything the government tells you. That's what you need to do.
story about a kid trying to build a block tower, literally based on us hanging out in the living room one day and my daughter trying to build a block tower, and she's like throwing this tantrum because everything's falling to the floor. And I was like,
You
that's
explain how steel can be melted at is thermite involved?
gravity. You're learning a lesson in physics, and like most people don't talk to 2-year-olds that way. We treat children like they are not smart.
Exactly. And you're obviously a rocket scientist here in your chairs with this also morbidly obese college student.
And they are. They're little scientists, and they're ready to absorb all this information. And if you put the right information into them, amazing things are going to happen.
If you
Exactly. They're not going to marry deadbeat guys.
could go back in time and you could talk to a younger version of yourself that believed all those years ago, what would you say to her?
I don't think I could necessarily say anything that would change her mind. You can't make people, believe differently. I definitely would tell her that things are going to get better because I think that was part of her problem. I might
Like these are 2 walking diabetics, right? This is, this girl's probably in her 20s. This woman's in her 30s. And the diet that they are eating, whatever it is, isn't working for them. Whatever foods they're stuffing into their ghoul holes isn't working for them, right? Because, they're both obese. And there's all these complications that go along with it. The government and the food industry, the FDA, allowing all these saturated fats and all these, all the, horrible foods that are out there and the fast foods and we know what it does to your body. Like, I say you go to Walmart and you see someone like this walking by you with a cart full of cancer and heart disease. And, when they're talking about how these official stories and this dangerous disinformation, and they're slamming, poison into their ghoul holes.
Grab her phone and type in how to disprove a conspiracy theory and click on a video and hand it to her before I disappeared. If you're someone who does believe in conspiracy theories,
Which is everybody, right? The big event in January was a conspiracy. The event I'm talking about the official story too. We're not talking about so-called conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists. I'm talking about official stories. This story of the big event, we just had the anniversary yesterday. Today's September 12th. There's a conspiracy there. The official story is that a bunch of people from, Muslim people from various parts of, the Middle East conspired to do whatever they did. That was a conspiracy, right? Everybody believes in conspiracy theories. There is a word for it. There's several definitions here. There's this definition here first. This is dictionary, whatever it is. Make secret plans jointly to commit an unlawful or harmful act they inspired against him. Another one down here is to agree together secretly, especially secretly, to do something wrong or evil or illegal. They conspired to kill the king. And then there's the Merriam-Webster, to join in a secret agreement to do an unlawful or wrongful act, or act which becomes unlawful as a result of the secret agreement. And act in harmony towards a common end. And there's another definition. There's a number of other definitions, right? And there was one definition, 2 or more people that agree to do something secretly that is nefarious. I don't have that, whatever it is. But there's all these various definitions because people conspire. Are you saying people don't conspire? Is that what these 2 women are saying? There's conspiracies going on all over the place, right? There was a conspiracy to put this this news piece out to do a hit job on people who are, this is again, PBS, Public Broadcasting System, that's supposed to be anti-government, anti-establishment. It's supposed to be free from corporate influence and not be a shill organization. It's supposed to be publicly funded. And there's lots of conspiracies. There's a lot of hippie conspiracies that used to be on PBS. They used to have a lot of, anti-corporate conspiracies they would talk about on PBS and some of these other, related networks, right? But now they're taking people who claim that they were formerly conspiracy theorists, and now they've been rehabilitated, and how detrimental it was to them to think this way, and how they were deeply flawed as a human being and couldn't take responsibility for their own poor relationship choices, right? So people conspire. That's a known fact. And if you're saying that people don't conspire and that governments don't lie and politicians don't lie and corporations don't lie, right? This was part of the liberal hippie movement to expose conspiracies. And that was what PBS was all about. And now liberals are pushing back against this idea. And these networks and these, PBS and, MSNBC and CNN and, across the board that are left-leaning liberal networks that are pushing back the idea. They're saying anybody who's a conspiracy theorist is mentally ill. But everybody is. Everybody thinks of, has conspiracies. All the stuff that Trump is being charged with is conspiracies, right? They're calling what Trump did in Georgia a conspiracy. So does that mean you're all conspiracy theorists, or just the conspiracies you believe in? Those are sane, but the stuff that, people believe in that are anti-establishment. I'm going to get into Jojo Magoo rigging the primary, the DNC rigging the primary against Kennedy. That's a conspiracy. And it's, anti-democratic. And what I was mentioning about these women's weight, I'm not mocking them for being, overweight. I'm overweight. Most Americans are. But the diet that people eat, if you eat just what the, normal person eats, and what the normal person can afford. Because the food that's most affordable is carcinogenic and heart disease. It causes cancer and heart disease. The cheap foods, whether it be fast food or the cheap processed foods at Walmart, is loaded with things that's going to hurt your health and going to lead to obesity and diabetes and these other things. I mean, that's a fact. Like, that's a known fact. The cheaper food, the food that poor people eat, and the junk food that college kids eat or whatever it is, right, young people eat, is bad for you. And it, wrecks your liver, and then all these other things happen. You get a fatty liver, and then you become obese. And, that's not a conspiracy. That's not doing something that hurts people, that is, intentionally done for whatever reason. That the Food and Drug Administration, that's supposed to oversee these things, and the government and the health departments that were so militaristic about COVID, allow all these poisonous foods that are causing people to have all kinds of, young people with chronic illnesses. And these two women are suffering from, something to do with conspiracies that put unhealthy things into human diet that causes obesity and health problems. And, who knows whatever kind of medications and things are on, right? Self-medicating, selling cigarettes, which everyone knows are harmful to you. Selling alcohol, which we all know what that does to you, right? And allowing these things to be, legally sold, that are toxins and poisons, caffeine and things like this. These things are toxins. They impair part of your system. They negatively affect your system. They have side effects, unhealthy side effects on your system. And they're suffering from this, right? Everybody is. And so, this is, what a ridiculous thing,
Maybe just for a day, do what I said that I did, and just kind of look into the possibility that maybe not all, but some of what you think it could possibly be wrong.
That's the whole idea behind believing in conspiracy theories in the first place, that what you've been indoctrinated with, right? Like, she's talking about how, wow, this is not a good shit. Dude, talking about how, these are the things that get you to believe these things in the first place, that you all of a sudden question the official story. And then there's all these alternative narratives. Some of them are wrong, some of them are right, some of them are disinfo, some of them are just stupid. But they are usually, for the most part, more accurate than the official story.
Hard to change minds, but that would ultimately be really cool. If just a couple of people could decide to get out of whatever online forum it is that they're on, go look up something and challenge their own beliefs. That's going to be the
You mean the official story, like a sheeple, you would do that, right?
moral of my story, because when I challenged my beliefs, it changed my world and it made my life better.
Which time? When you challenged your beliefs, when you started believing in conspiracy theories, or when you stopped? Because that happened twice. You're given a belief system, you hear things reported in the news, and then you're given a secondary belief system. We hear conspiracy theories, and then you went back and now you're a debunker, right? This is a hit piece, right, on people who don't accept the official story. And her saying, when you're into disinfo and these things, right, these are terms, right? It's a part of a strategy. It's a part of a psychological operation, because everybody believes in conspiracies, which I've said so many times. You watch any TV show, especially if it involves the government, or, it's a spy movie, or is, these things, but even sitcoms, there are conspiracies and people are conspiring. It's a behavior that people do. And conspiracies are responsible for a lot of the things that happen in our country and, the world on an economic level or social level. And a lot of things start with a conspiracy, a lot of movements, some of them positive, some of them negative. Because if you were transparent about everything you were going to do, it would be shut down, good or bad. This is the reality of, there's, like, let's say you invented a car that ran on water. Well, you better keep that M&F secret until you can roll it out to the public, because they're going to try to shut it down every possible way and disappear you in the vehicle, right? Like that would be something good that you would have to create a conspiracy to get the thing out. And it wouldn't be a conspiracy in the sense that it would be bad for people, but you would have to do it secretly because of the system. And, if everything was democratic, like try to run your family, or if you're a boss, run your business by a democracy where you ask everyone their opinion and you get information out there, try to educate everybody. And, it would take forever. Like you can't make your decision by everybody voting or coming to a consensus. It doesn't work that way. Like people have to rise up and become leaders and make decisions. And the problem is our leaders are corrupt and our leaders are bad people. And I'm not saying there should be kings and these types of things. That's that's even worse than a democracy. But I'm saying people who are qualified because of their spiritual, their spiritual development, and who don't want to lead, right? Who aren't looking for power or any of these things. They're just good at it, and they would make decisions, right? And it would be very limited. Only the decisions that would have to be made. Not to get into people's freedom of choice or get into people's own process, because people have to do what they're going to do, because they're going to do it anyway. So if you're a leader, you have to allow for that, right? You can't control people. But I'm talking about the overall structure of things. And there has to be rules in a system where people suck, where human beings are murderous, lying, conning, all these things, manipulative, especially now where people are so twisted. Then, there has to be rules. There has to be things to, keep the criminal element at bay. And there has to be heavy control because of people being so bad. And you think, oh, if the governments suck, if we got rid of the governments, you'd be like, oh man, this is way worse. You see what people do, and it doesn't have to be all of them. It only has to be about 10%. They'll be criminal and thug-like. And then you realize why there are governments in the first place. Because there is issues with humanity and our lower tendencies. And people make bad choices all the time. You see it. These women are making bad choices, and at least in terms of their health and their diet. They're young women who are going to suffer health issues because of their body mass and whatever else is going on with them, right? People make bad choices. That woman was talking about being in bad choices with abusive men and these things. People are making self-destructive choices every day. And, choices that are bad for other people. So what do you do as a leader? You just let everybody just, wipe themselves out and, behave in violent or you put in a bunch of controlling rules and micromanage people's lives, which also has negative effects. There's not a lot to do that's, with a negative population, which we are, with negative tendencies, right? Of course, it's the Kali Yuga, so it's worse. But there are times that people can do better, but even then, there's deep flaws within the human system, the human genome, the human psyche, the human, everything to do with how human beings are. And, I covered that quite extensively. And I talk about it more in depth in the Journey series, of course, and the tendencies for humans to do bad things. And each one of us have to work our way through that and become, better people and become people who make better decisions for ourselves and the collective and follow the right path and follow the divinity within us. And right now, most people aren't even getting a whiff of that. Like they don't think about that, don't want to do it. And many of them can't do that. And so in this mess that is humanity, you have certain people say, well, why don't I get something more for myself and my family? And they conspire to get power, to get money, whatever it is. It happens all the time. It's the basis of our economy in many ways, and certainly our politics and global politics, where conspiracies are constantly being, manufactured and executed. And so, when you start seeing the conspiracies and pointing them out, and you can do it in an intelligent way, they don't want any part of you, right? They don't want to interview somebody who's reasonable, who's educated, who's, there's lots of people in the truth community who are reasonable people. They're people functioning on a high level and could articulate these positions, and PBS doesn't bring them on their show. They take somebody who's, had a lifestyle of ignorant, she's some sort of redneck-looking, obese woman who's been in abusive relationships and probably a history of drug abuse, as a single mom. And, she's doing whatever she's doing. And she flirted with some conspiracies. A lot of them are the goofy ones led by, the right-wing element of, goofy, like stupid ones. And then somehow she finds these sites that poke holes in the conspiracies, and she goes from believing one thing to believing the other, and then they interview her, because she represents somebody that people who watch the show can look down on and keep their prejudice against people who, and this is again a liberal audience on PBS, that when they were hippies themselves were, they were chasing conspiracies left and right about the man and the government. And so let's segue into a real conspiracy where the Democratic Party is rigging the Democratic primary against Kennedy and the other candidates, and are just choosing Joe Biden, even though the majority of Democrats, the overwhelming majority of Democrats, don't want him. Whatever you think about RFK Jr., I have mixed feelings, which I've expressed before. He's not going to change anything, and he has, different, not different, but he has a lot of issues. He's got a lot of, baggage and things. He has some truther-like tendencies. But no matter what you think about him, whether you like him or dislike him, he is exposing, his candidacy is exposing the corruption and the rigging of the elections, the tendency to rig elections for the DNC. Like the DNC is always saying they're the parties they're the party that's defending democracy. That's one of the big things that their claim to fame is, that they're defending democracy from Trump and Trumpers who want to move towards some sort of totalitarian type regime, presidential regime. But they've rigged the last 3 primaries. They rigged the Hillary Clinton primary, they rigged the first Biden primary, and now they're rigging this one. And it's so blatant. And he discusses it here on this Forbes interview.
What do you make of the DNC calendar?
Well, I think, it's pretty clear that the DNC does not want a primary. I don't want to say that they want a coronation, but that's...
Just say it's rigged. Say it's rigged, which means if they're willing to rig this, and this is just Democrats, then they would have been willing to rig the thing against Trump. And many Democrats and many, the politicians themselves would admit, at least one guy admitted, I covered this maybe, 6 months ago, that they rigged it against Trump, and it was okay because Trump was so horrible, that the ends justified the means. But they're the ones that are claiming that they're pro-democracy, right?
I think that that's a fair way to put it, actually. They're doing, they're essentially, they're fixing the process so that it makes it almost impossible to have democracy function. They're effectively disenfranchising the Democratic voters from having any choice in who becomes president or who becomes the Democratic nominee. So 2 of the things they've done to date is they've moved the Iowa primary. They've made rules that if anybody campaigns in Iowa or any candidate sets foot in the state of Iowa or sets foot in the state of New Hampshire, then none of the votes that are cast for that candidate will be tallied. In other words, any delegate that I win in New Hampshire or Iowa would go instead to the president. And now,
so you think about this. This should be national news, because the DNC is saying we're not going to have a primary for our candidate, and they got a guy who's senile, and 66% of Democrats want somebody else. They don't necessarily want Kennedy, but they want somebody else. And so, he's not been a great president. He's always been kind of he doesn't have a fan base, and he's clearly breaking down. They don't want Kamala either, right? And so they are just forcing the Democrats to accept whatever candidate and say, well, who do you want? Anybody or Trump, right? Do you want Trump or you want this guy? Like, just if you don't vote for this guy, you're going to have Trump. That's their whole strategy. And whatever else goes into that. Like, I don't know how much control they have over the voting process and how much they rigged it against Trump. I mean, there's lots of various information about this in the out there about how much was rigged with the mail-in ballots or not. I don't know. Like, I don't know and I don't care. It's a willingness to cheat or willingness to control things that is obvious here, and that's being admitted to. They're just doing it. Like, they don't care, and they're not thinking that the media will cover this. They're not thinking that, people will react to this, right? If you didn't hear him say this, there'd be no other place to find out that this is going on. I mean, Fox News isn't, as far as I know, even covering this, right? They might cover this because, it's damaging to the Democrats. But there's no way to even find it out. Like, the Democrats don't even know this is going on, right? They don't even have any clue about this.
They're trying to change it so that if I campaign in New Hampshire, that none of the votes cast for me in Georgia will count. And that's significant because it's hard to win the nomination without Georgia.
What is
So
what is the
rigging
logic?
Well, they're rigging it so that it, effectively, we're looking at the tabulations now that look like if you add up all the super delegates that they control and all of the automatic delegates that just go to the party and go to the president, I would have to win almost 80% of all of the states in order to beat President Biden, even if he only wins 20%.
And
or
yet
25%.
and yet you
So, it's completely being rigged against him. And this is what they did against Bernie Sanders twice. So they did this against, and they came out and they just admitted this on CNN. When Biden was losing to Bernie Sanders, Biden finished 4th and 5th in New Hampshire and Iowa. This is why they don't want to run that back again, because he would lose New Hampshire and Iowa. There's no question about it. They wouldn't do this if he was going to win it. And so he would lose the first two states, and everyone would say, oh, this is a primary. And so then it would become, just because he's incumbent president doesn't guarantee him the nomination. But they're saying, oh, we're going to nominate Biden no matter what. And there shouldn't be any challengers, and you're not a Democrat if you oppose him. And that's not how democracy works, right? And, I don't know I guess they can do this legally because they're not a democracy. It's a Democratic Party. And so, this is whatever it is, but they've done this openly in the past, and now even more so. Like the Democratic Party, and I'm not a Republican, and I don't, I'm not voting, but this is this is great for just showing you that they're completely collapsed. They no longer believe in democracy because they listened to their voters when CNN, of all, the network CNN, which is a shill network for the Democratic Party, is saying that 66% of the Democrats want Joe Biden out. And they didn't want him in the first place. If he won, whatever he won against Trump, it was because there's Trump hatred. It wasn't Biden love. Biden didn't win because people loved him. He won because people hated Trump. And, that was, and now, like, he's just drooling on himself. He's a complete mess. And, all of it, right?
you continue on. So what is your strategy then in light of this for defeating President Biden?
These rules will not be finalized until September 14th, and we've written the DNC protesting. I mean, there's some really wild things that they're now considering, including forcing me to actually pay for the primaries. And their logic is that they don't need a primary because they already have a candidate. And therefore, I'm costing them all this money, and that money should be paid for by me and, maybe Marianne Williamson. So it's not, it's a process that is rigged. And we live at a time in American history when a lot of Americans think that democracy is broken, that the political system is rigged, and that there's not really any democracy. And unfortunately, the DNC is taking a lot of steps that confirm that outlook.
You mentioned you're going
So, I think he said something here about third party candidate.
to South Carolina. How is this impacting your strategy around Iowa and New Hampshire in light of what the new DNC rules are?
Well, I'm campaigning in those states, so I'm going to continue to campaign in those states. Those are important states for the American democracy. They're really the only states that really require you to do retail politics, to go to the
Okay, so I think he said something here later about maybe being a third party candidate. There's also this here.
talk to voters other than just donors. The other states, are content with having candidates kind of aerial bombard them from 30,000 feet with advertising that is, the DNC has $2 billion now in their bank account.
So they've raised $2 billion, which I don't know how. Because when they were, after the Obama, after Obama won his second term, the DNC was $12 billion in debt. Debbie Wasserman Schultz was a disastrous person as a leader. And then the DNC got hacked under her. And then Podesta, who was a prominent member of the DNC, got hacked as well. So they were getting hacked. Podesta was a guy who wrote about cybersecurity. He led a team of people to investigate and write a paper about how to keep our doing cybersecurity. And then he got hacked. Like, he gave up his password, is whatever it was, right? And the DNC was a disaster. And so Hillary Clinton came in and raised $1 billion. It was the first time someone had raised $1 billion. She had twice as much money as Trump, and then she got hammered, even by, it was kind of rigged in her favor. Everyone said Trump was a joke candidate. That was great, the way that played out. And so now, last time Biden had $2 billion and Trump had $1. And so, it's a 2-to-1. Like, that's when you have a money advantage, when advertising and all these things are imperative, you should win easily. And Biden has $2 billion worth of ad money. I saw this in terms of, I made a lot more money during October, November, and December on my YouTube channel than any other time. It was, extraordinarily more money because of all the political ads. It's amazing how much money the politicians have and what the ads they're going to run. And then all of a sudden, you'll see this. There'll be a spike that will be reflected if you're, if you're running ads on social media, because they're buying everything up they can. And then the prices go up. It's like crazy. And it's right before the holiday season on top of it, which is when when ads cost the most money on YouTube and these other places. And so, like, it's all about that now, right? Like, it's about, people buying the election through, whatever advertising and other strategies they can employ with having more money, right? More money usually wins in sports or anything else. And the DNC has all this money at their disposal, and they got a candidate that nobody wants. And if it wasn't for Trump, they would have no chance. Like, if Trump would disappear, like I keep on saying, they would have no chance of winning, because anybody else wouldn't, people wouldn't be as passionate about that person not getting elected. I mean, they try to, destroy the person on the media, but no one really watches the media. And everyone look at Biden and say the guy is, drooling on himself, right? He's not mentally competent. People want change already. And they want to move on from the Trump-Biden era. They're linked together.
That's all given by, or most of it given by, large donors, and that they can use that money to do slick campaign ads, and President Biden will not actually ever have to meet a donor. And then they have occasionally, maybe he'll do a rally in which they're very heavily orchestrated, in which everybody who goes to that rally is screened, and there's nothing unexpected, and there's no unscripted contact with voters. And I don't think that's good for democracy if the only people that President Biden is talking to is his.
It's clearly not democracy. Like, this guy should call it out more. I don't think it matters either way, because they're just thumbing their nose at their voters, right? They're not giving the Democrats what they want. And they didn't last time either. The Democrats really didn't want Biden. They didn't know who they wanted, but Biden lost the first two primaries. It was clear they didn't want him. And they certainly didn't want Kamala Harris, because she already dropped out, because she was given a lot of run in the beginning. They got her up to 12% of the Democratic vote. And then people took a look at her and said, oh, we don't like her. And she was down below 1% for the rest of the time. And then she quit. Right? So they're just, this is the Democratic Party. And I'm not, saying Republicans are so much better, but the Democrats are just, it's become some sort of evil regime.
Donors, because then he's living in a bubble, and he's living in a bubble where he's only talking to very, very wealthy Americans who aren't enduring many of the hardships that are facing the majority of the people in this country. That 57% of the people in this country can't put their hands on.
This is some of his spiel here. But I think he goes on to talk about being possibly a third-party candidate, which is, that'd be interesting as well. All right, so I had all these up. I was going to put in my 2 videos ago, but I just, I ran out of time. And this is from CNBC from 10 days ago. CNBC is a part of NBC. It's the financial network for NBC. And NBC is a shill network for, for Biden. And, they have Morning Joe. They have all these, everything about the network, all their commentators, all their news coverage is pro-Joe Biden in ways that are, even worse than CNN. Like, they're more pro-Biden than CNN. And this guy says this.
Let's switch gears real quickly, Frank, because I'm sure you've got a point on this. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but you can handle anything, my friend. I know it, which is this. I interviewed Robert F. Kennedy Jr. earlier this week, and at the end of it, I asked him a question. I kind of knew what he was going to say, but I was trying to kind of spur a conversation, which is he would obviously like to debate President Biden. Now, here's the thing. Incumbents, they don't debate in primaries. I don't think they ever have. Maybe back in the 1800s, who knows? I think I mistakenly said 76 once with Ford. That was wrong. You get my point. Incumbents don't debate. That said, given a 17% polling rate from Robert F. Kennedy, given 69% of Democrats consider the president perhaps too old, given a lot of other factors, should the Democratic National Committee endorse at least one primary debate, or no way?
No way. This one's an easy question. I believe Bobby Kennedy is going to get somewhere between 30 and 40% of the Democratic vote in New Hampshire. And that'll be an embarrassment for President Biden. But better for Kennedy to do that well than for Joe Biden to risk having a bad debate performance. And quite frankly, as we get into the end of 2023 and Republicans begin to have their debates and their caucuses and primaries, I still wonder why the Democrats don't turn to the president and say to him, sir, the economy is getting a little bit better. Inflation seems to be coming down. This is a great time to pass the torch to the next generation. We're not electing Joe Biden at the age of 80, 81, 82. We're electing him for 4 years. At 86, do you really believe 5.5 years from now that he'll be effective?
And Ken, I don't know if you saw the interview, Frank, we'll send it to you. If not, Kennedy Jr. brought up an interesting point, which was, because he is a Democrat, although some people will argue that there's a lot of libertarian backers of him, even some conservative, whatever. He said this: President Biden is more than likely to be the nominee. President Biden will then have to debate in a presidential debate with whoever the GOP nominee might be, and this could be good practice. You don't want to come into the big game without throwing a few warm-up pitches.
By the way, I want CNBC to have a Republican debate. I want CNBC to have a Democratic debate because we need to be focused on economic issues.
See, this is bad. Like, this is bad for Biden because CNBC, again, is part of they're business oriented and they're, it's part of a scam, all that stuff, right? Kramer and all that stuff. There's a lot of pump and dump things run through this network. But, they are admitting, and you see this more and more in the media, that Joe Biden is just too far gone to be an effective candidate and an effective leader. Like, everyone kind of knows it, and they just won't say it because it was the case in 2019. Like, I was saying this, and, lots of us were saying this because it was obvious the guy was showing signs of dementia in 2019. And he wasn't great beforehand. He had a lot of negatives, but they rolled him out here and they rigged it. They did whatever they did. But eventually, it was not a sustainable plan, right? Like, it was only going to get worse. And, this is the end of any illusion about democracy. I don't know how long we've had a democracy, and I don't even believe in democracy. You go to Walmart and you look at the average person. You look at the, idiocracy of the average, not just average, just people in general in America. And people are so clueless. Even in the truth community, it's not like everybody's vote's the same. It's not like everybody's reasoning process is the same. And so democracy is, there's some good things about it, but it's really just it's an easy system to rig. People think how much better it is. It's the economy that makes our lifestyle. It isn't our politics. It isn't a democracy that gives you the lifestyle. It's the, it's the colonialistic, debt-based economy that gives us the, what we have here. So this is, it's self-explanatory here.
Moving now to the topic of the war in Ukraine. Today, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, he was pressed about these reports. Elon Musk refused to provide Starlink access to the Ukrainian military for their operations against Russia. Let's take a listen to the exchange.
Musk says he was reportedly afraid that Russia would retaliate with nuclear weapons. Musk says that's based on his private discussions he had with senior Russian officials. Are you concerned that Musk is apparently conducting his own diplomatic outreach to the Russian government? Really, none of this...
It's crazy. Well, yeah, it's crazy. Look at, he's getting animated. Droopy dog.
...concerns you?
Jake, I can't speak to conversations that may or may not have happened. I don't know. I'm focused on the fact that the technology itself, Starlink, has been really important to the Ukrainians.
Well, to Blinken's point, it certainly has. It has been really the crux of a lot of the Ukrainian military operations. And then Musk gets involved, allegedly, by this one particular approach, one operation. What do you make of that? And should Elon Musk face some sort of repercussions?
Because he doesn't want his technology being used for a war. That's a private company, a private citizenship. This is their whole argument, that Google can censor us and Facebook can censor us and, all these platforms can censor us because they're a private company. But then they'll pull their, they'll punish those companies if they don't do what Biden wanted. Remember the Biden administration, they threatened to there's some sort of a proposition, some sort of a, there's a, I don't want to call it a law, but there's a rule in place where social media networks can't be sued for what their users post on their platforms. And then Biden threatened to take that away, which would kill the network. And so they started to censor based on Biden's pressure. It's just, this is criminal stuff. This is like mafiosa stuff, right? Like it's the whole thing here.
Well, Alex, here's what's happening. This is a broader challenge that we're facing as a country right now. Space is becoming heavily commercialized, right? It used to be the domain of governments, but clearly private companies are bigger and bigger players launching these satellite constellations that are critical for our communications, and that trend continues. And other aspects of our national security continue to move more towards the private sector.
Like he moves in such a weird way, Musk does. I mean, he's got a weird idiosyncratic way of moving. You see that there are actual conspiracies here, right? Where the DNC is rigging the election against Kennedy and for Biden, and that's a conspiracy, and them expecting private companies like Elon Musk's Starlink to help with their, war efforts and all these things, right? You look at the news and it's filled with conspiracies that the government themselves and the media are talking about. And it's okay for them to say evil people are conspiring, but they'll never do that, right? We never do that, but conspiring is a part of human behavior. And what's happened is they don't justify or explain their depravity or their lying or their unethical behavior. Like 66% of Democrats say we don't want Biden. Well, screw you. We don't care. They've stopped listening to the masses because they know that they have a controlled population that will not rebel. That's one reason. The other reason, they don't have a choice because lies and deception and conspiracies make the system go. And they're managing of people and controlling people, and people buying into it because of their, your needs that are, or desires that are being, and addictions that are being satisfied by the system. And so, that's, even people in the truth community are still going out and feeding their addictions. People say they're awoken. I woke up, but in reality, most people in the truth community are doing things that are destructive to their body, eating fast foods, consuming, some sort of substances, illegal substances, or medications or whatever it is, and are fueling their bodies, or they're fueling their addictions through the system. And if most truthers were going to be honest, if they said they were given the choice between giving up their lifestyle and everything that the system provides for them and living living under a non-evil system, but they'd have to give everything up to do that, or just keeping their mouth shut, or just complaining but never doing anything about it, which is what the truth community has become about, they would choose the system. They would choose the beast. People who are so-called conspiracy theorists are only, that in theory. Like they're only that in, they'll talk about the theories but don't want to change or give anything up themselves. And in most cases, we really can't, right? We can't free ourselves from the system that we're 100% dependent on. There's no pathway for us to do that, and no desire to do that either. So they believe in hopium or whatever it is. But there are conspiracies out there, obviously. There's lots of them. And then there's just stupid stuff that gets shared in the truth community, things that are, not accurate, whole movements that are disinformation. And, it's all of those things. But the powers that be have, they just have entered into this relationship, the dynamic relationship between the power structure and the people is, if the people catch them in lies, catch them committing acts of criminal acts, or, as a system, as a government, as a political party, as corporations, whatever it may be, they just pretend it doesn't happen, or just, this idea that you're in a relationship with somebody who has power over you. It might be your parents, it might be your boss, and they, they're doing things that are wrong and they're abusing their power. And they just, find ways to threaten you if you speak up, or disenfranchise you, or, cut you off in some ways if you do something they don't like. They have ways of controlling the complaints against them. This is what all abusers do. But, if you go a little bit deeper, you find out they don't really have a choice, because although they're engaging in these abusive activities and they have their own, they're getting their own little, cuts of the pie, their own little, payoffs, the system itself can't handle the truth. The truth in the system can't coexist. And so it becomes a choice whether you want to live without the system and have complete chaos, or you want, you want to live by your morals and ethics and by your soul. And for most people, it's, they don't want to do that. They just can't. And so that's where we are. That's the reality of our situation. It's not a popular message. Like most people who watch my videos, you may or may not agree with this, or you kind of know it's true, but it's not the happy ending that you'd like. Like you'd want to have some situation where the evildoers would get their just desserts and, all those things. But it just doesn't happen. It won't happen because we're all in on it, right? Like when the system goes down, we all suffer. And we all suffer, a similar fate because we're all dependent on the system in one way or another. And so that's the choice, right? You either keep on limping along with a system that is depraved and, demonic and all these things. Or you free yourself from that and you live, or the system collapses, and then we have to deal with that, like, what that means. And it won't be good. Like a systemic collapse is much worse. As bad as governments are, if you go and trace out historically what happens when there's regime change, when there's governmental collapse, when there's revolution, it gets way worse. It gets way worse after a revolution or a systemic collapse. If the government goes down, it could be the worst government, the most corrupt government. It enters into thug rule and criminal behavior. People starve and their lifestyle sucks, and it's just chaos. And then people are free to, the bad people are free to do whatever they're going to do, and then other people get involved. People get hurt and wounded, and they suffer trauma as their family members are arred and killed and enslaved and human trafficked and all these things. And there's no rule of law, and there's just chaos. And then people, out of their trauma, they act out, and you have all these people who are, born babies and children born in trauma who become horrible people themselves. And you see what happens. It just completely devolves into ugliness. As bad as the system is, it is better than that, right? At least on a material level. And there's no spirituality in that either, because you don't have time to connect to God because you're too busy trying to survive the chaos and the thug rule and the hellish environment that's created. And so that's our choices, and there is no real choice. And so you just keep on chugging along and doing your best to make personal improvements. And most people won't want to do that, so they'll go to somebody else, and they want to hear some message of hopium, right? And that's that is whatever it is. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Rovato, definitely reporting the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.